It was a shimmery, sunny day in July 1990 in the White House Rose Garden when President George Bush signed the long-awaited Americans with Disabilities Act. Over 3,000 disability advocates gathered that day to celebrate, finally, the law affirming their civil and human rights. 5 years later, another several hundred activists, some who had been there in 1990, came together to say happy birthday to the ADA, to mark its achievements, and to challenge some of the myths and media backlash inspired by the ADA. Again, it was a warm Washington summer day. Inside the National Press Club building, John Kemp served as the event's MC for an enthusiastic crowd, including invited delegates from each of the 50 states, as well as Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. One of the key assumptions in the ADA itself is that people can and do speak for themselves, and they speak with eloquence and with the bright, clear truth of their own experiences.
Hello, my name is Christopher Hazard of Wears Valley, Tennessee, and I am 9 years old. Even though we live out in farm country in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, I'm here today to tell you how the Americans with Disabilities Act has made a difference to me and my whole family. My mom, my sister Cassandra, who is 4 years old, and myself all have a rare degenerative disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and hemophilia. Although my disability is not always as obvious as my mom's, sometimes it feels like our whole family is sitting in my mom's wheelchair. Our bank, Home Federal and Sevierville, finally, after telling them for 2 years that our parking was not wide enough, repainted their parking lot so that my mom would have a fully van-accessible spot to park in. This is the best spot we have found so far. Actually, it's the only van-accessible spot we have found in all of Sevierville. Actually, it's the only... I measured it myself. It's 18 feet and 3 inches wide. It didn't cost the bank very much money because all it took was some paint. My mom goes to the post office in Sevierville 3 or 4 times a week. This past fall, they finally repainted their parking, improved their sidewalk and ramp access, so now my mom can go all by herself. I had to show her where the post office box was because she had never been in the post office before. Now I can be a kid again and my mom can go by herself. The best one of all... The best one of all is Taste Buds Cafe in Wears Valley. My dad helped Jock build a real good ramp, deck, and entrance into his restaurant.
I am here today as an advocate for individuals with disabilities and to encourage other business owners to go above and beyond what is required by law, such as the ADA. I became determined to do what was right, not only for people with disabilities, but what was right as a businessman. I'm glad I found an individual who was so knowledgeable and willing to work with the business community to help us understand what the ADA really means. I only wish that every other business would realize that this has increased my business. Although I am a small business and could have claimed it was not financially feasible, I had a firm commitment to doing what was right, not only for the Hazard family, but for every individual with a disability.
I admonish that the ADA regulations continue to be enforced and that there be continued efforts to educate not only employers, but children in all grade levels so that their understanding and exposure to diverse populations begin early. I urge that education includes people of color in urban communities. Oftentimes, we fail to realize that the ADA protects us as well.
My story is about my daughter, who is also blind, and she's an honor student at Wilson High School in Portland. And last year she was taking geometry, and her teacher wanted her to drop one of her classes so that she could stay after school and learn how to draw the figures. I called her teacher and said, look, this child is blind. She's taking your class. She gets the concepts. Once she gets out of your class, she's never going to draw again. I don't think this is really crucial for her. He said to me, that's not what I think. Your daughter's told me that she's considering going into architecture. I said, get real, Mr. Dorsey. My daughter is blind. She is not going to be an architect, okay? Mr. Dorsey said, get real, Mrs. Cranston. Yes, she can be an architect if she wants to be.
My sister and I are both deafblind. We grew up in Boston homes. I was in 22 homes by the time I graduated, about the time I graduated from high school. So I went back to school, and believe it or not, I have made it through 4 years, and I will get my bachelor's and go on to grad school and get my degree in rehabilitation too. Thanks to ADA. 4 years ago, it started for me.
Without question, the ADA has unshackled deaf and hard of hearing people from years of dependence on federal subsidies, unemployment, underemployment. The ADA is not about freeloading. It's about empowerment and work opportunities.
Independent living without the ADA isn't real. There are over 400 independent living centers throughout the country who work and teach and promote the ADA. These are the lives we're talking about. This is our freedom.
It is my honor to just to say thank you to all the staff and everybody that put this together, and Justin and everybody in this room. But it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for you guys here today, because you make it possible.
ADA has been a tool that I have used to teach, to cajole, and to advance the principles of full inclusion for people like myself with disabilities in every aspect of life. There's one thing that I think is important. We need to look back to pre-1990, as people have said before. At that point, we only could deal with fighting our battles city by city, state by state, issue by issue. And we could only hope and pray that what we saw as a moral point would be dealt with. I don't want to go back to a time when there was only moral law. Once the ADA was passed, we had a federal umbrella that allowed us to deal with all of the injustices on a broad-based level, because the injustices were not in only pockets of this country. One thing I know, the ADA for me has made me feel like for the first time, I'm a real American.
The celebration, sponsored by the National Council on Disability, was an opportunity to bring together the many people from all walks of life who are interested in and committed to disability issues. And most importantly, it was the official date of release of a special report prepared by the NCD called Voices of Freedom, America Speaks Out on the ADA. In 1994 and 95, NCD members visited throughout America and listened to personal, poignant, and passionate stories about the impact of the ADA on the everyday lives of everyday people. This report was officially presented to Attorney General Janet Reno by Council Chair Marka Bristow.
We were expressing a new Independence Day for America. An Independence Day that would say to 49 million Americans, the door is open. Consciousness has been raised. It is not what we say that is so important. It is what we do and what we realize and what we make a difference in the real lives of real people.
Actually, ADA is an insurance policy for those who do not yet have a disability, but like me can have it quickly, like I did when I had an automobile accident when I was 15 years old. And so it is an insurance policy, and people need to understand that, and people need to be supportive and have it in place in case they need it. And so with these employers, what we have found is that prior to ADA, that over 50% of people who were employed, who developed a disability, lost their job. In the last 5 years, we have now seen over 75% of the people who had jobs, who developed a disability, now retain their job. ADA is having an impact.
I'm pleased to be able to speak to you today on behalf of the United States Conference of Mayors and my colleagues across this nation. As you know, the nation's mayors have been at the forefront of civil rights movement over the past 3 decades. As leaders of cities with diverse populations, we embrace the Americans with Disabilities Act as the latest and most comprehensive civil rights statute prohibiting discrimination on the basis of disability because we believe in serving all of the residents of our city, regardless of race, gender, or disability. If we are to rebuild and reemerge our urban centers, we as mayors believe that all citizens with their diverse viewpoints and interests must participate in the dialogue and implement the solutions. 5 years ago, 49 million Americans with disabilities, Americans who work, pay taxes, and vote, did not have basic civil rights. 5 years ago, Americans with disabilities were finally included as an amendment to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act, like the 1964 Civil Rights Act, guarantees equal opportunity for everyone to compete for a job, equal access to buildings, and for those with physical challenges, and equal possibility for all to realize their full potential. Mayors are committed to assuring that this vital civil rights law is upheld.
As we mark the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we do not look behind, we look ahead. We look ahead at new developments, and we look ahead to new opportunities and new growth. But in looking back, I remember that clear summer day 5 years ago, hardly seems that long, when we were out on the White House lawn, when we changed the world for millions of individuals with disabilities. On that day, we sent a simple yet powerful message heard around the world, that disability is a natural part of the human experience, that in no way diminishes an individual's fundamental right to fully participate in all aspects of society. On that day, we said no to exclusion, and no to dependence, and no to paternalism. We said yes to inclusion, and yes to independence, and yes to empowerment for 49 million people with disabilities in this country. On that day, we lit a beacon of hope for hundreds of millions of people with disabilities all around the world. The ADA strikes the common sense balance between the rights of people with disabilities and the legitimate concerns of employers and businesses. Study after study demonstrates that the ADA is not resulting in the undue costs and excessive litigation that many feared. Just look at the study that we did on Sears, and you'll see that. In fact, many businesses are even willing to admit that the ADA is working. I am guided by the same pledge a school child makes at the beginning of the day. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To me, all includes individuals with disabilities. The ADA is a shining light of equality here in America and around the world.
A panel of distinguished disability researchers presented important information about the positive impact of accommodations provided for disabled people in the workforce and about successful partnerships between corporate America and people with disabilities.
In our study of Sears, we found some rather remarkable findings which are quite consistent with some of the other anecdotal stories and also consistent with the work the President's Committee has done at JAN. Since 1978, this is a company with 20,000 employees who self-identify as people with disabilities. 2/3 of all so-called accommodations at Sears cost nothing. And I won't go through the litany of typical accommodations, but you can imagine that most of them involved common sense, and most of them improve the productivity of already otherwise qualified individuals with disabilities.
A panel of representatives from business and government shared their views of the impact of the ADA. Included were spokespersons from the state of Washington, the Council of Better Business Bureaus, Bell Atlantic, and the Marriott Corporation. They were followed by a panel of people representing members of Congress and of governmental agencies dedicated to the issues of persons with disabilities.
My vision of tomorrow, as a senator, as an American, as chairman of the Subcommittee on Disability Policy, is founded on the belief that we will make the time find the energy and build the new partnerships needed to make civil rights for individuals with disabilities something that all Americans accept, expect, and protect.
In the next 5 years, we must all work together to ensure that the laudable goals of the ADA are achieved efficiently, fairly, knowledgeably, honestly, and amicably. Fair and reasonable implementation of this essential law will ensure that all people with disabilities will be able to achieve their full potential. I look forward to a day when all Americans are rewarded for their abilities, not punished for their disabilities, and when Americans with disabilities face no barriers to achieving their highest goals.
5 years ago tomorrow, 3,000 people with disability, their friends, families, and advocates gathered together on the lawn of the White House to witness the signing of the ADA and the end to second-class citizenship for 49 million people with disabilities in this country. Today, 5 years later, as you have heard, there has been some progress. We should applaud and celebrate those victories. But we should not leave here today without renewing our commitment to living in a world without architectural and attitudinal barriers, without public policy based on myths, stereotypes, and fears, and most of all, without discrimination. It is not just up to business to comply with the ADA. It is not just up to government to comply and enforce the ADA. It is up to us to educate ourselves as well as Congress as to our rights and our responsibilities. It is up to us to see that the beacon of integration will brightly burn from our generation to the next, for the work is not yet done.
The ADA is about independence. The ADA is about empowerment, and independence, empowerment, getting people on the job, keeping people on the job is what the ADA is all about. And that, my friends, should ring true, should ring strong up on Capitol Hill, because those are the themes that's being bantered about up on Capitol Hill today. And those, in fact, are the themes of the ADA.
Perhaps the highlight of the celebration came when the enthusiastic audience welcomed honored guest Justin Dart, former Attorney General Dick Thornburgh, and current Attorney General Janet Reno. The presence of these dignitaries from two administrations signifies strong and consistent bipartisan support of the ADA.
Most important, to the 52 people with disabilities who have shared with us their stories in an effort to shine a light of freedom for the American people on the Americans with Disabilities Act. Thank you. 5 years ago, you also came forward and came through with us and shared your scar tissue, in the words of Tony Coelho. You told us what it was like to be discriminated in if you were a person with disability in America. You told us the story of the deaf woman who woke up after surgery to discover she had had a mastectomy that she did not know she was going to have because a sign language interpreter was not provided. And we told you what it felt like to feel discriminated against. America responded with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We passed this law recognizing it as a legal tool and as a symbol to America that times had changed, that we had changed. The law also carries with it a very strong moral statement. We set about changing the way people with disabilities view ourselves and also the way the world views us. In America, in the 5 years since the law has passed, a flurry of activity has occurred. Technical assistance centers through the Department of Justice have been set up. Businesses are beginning to comply. And yet in this flurry, this country, in an effort to search for its soul, has been faced with many challenges. We have to reach into the hearts and souls of people. Martin Luther King understood that a law can change behavior, but it cannot change the hearts and souls of people. Only people can do that. And the ADA begins to create a bridge for us to talk to each other where we can start that process.
The face of America is beginning to change. We see the advances every day. A ramp at the neighborhood supermarket, a sign language interpreter at a town meeting, or at meetings like this, Braille on the ATM machine at our local bank, fully accessible hotel rooms with TDYs and roll-in showers. We are indeed witnessing a profound, benign revolution. We as a nation are literally being transformed. People with disabilities are assuming their rightful roles as independent, self-supporting, involved citizens.
This is democracy at its best. On July 26, 1990, after thousands of years of outcast status, the United States of America recognized people with disabilities as full members of the human race. Thank God Almighty, free at last. Now, on the 5th birthday of the ADA, all we have dreamed is possible, all we have gained is challenged. Science and free enterprise offer the culture of our dreams. If we are included, the world is watching, the world will follow. Will ADA prevail? Will America use science and free enterprise to empower all of its people? Success will mean the culture of our dreams. Failure is unthinkable.
We have heard the voices of the people of America in these last 30 minutes. We have heard loud, clear, eloquent voices. These are the voices that have made the ADA a success. They have opened the nation's doors. They are helping to open people's minds. And Justin and Marka have helped me in the 2.5 years that I've been in office understand the tremendous potential of all the humans in all parts of this land, in the small Tennessee Valley, in metropolitan Washington. Wherever we go, we see examples of the greatness of the human spirit and what can be done if we have trust and confidence and faith in all our people. It is amazing what happens when people with disabilities speak out and show the world what can be done by people who care and want to see this act complied with. There was Tim from a small town in Kansas. He just wanted a bendable straw from the local Dairy Queen so that he could drink a milkshake. When the owner asked him what else he could do, Tim gave him some ideas. And before long, the entire store was accessible. There was 17-year-old Brad from Albertville, Alabama. He traveled through town telling businesses how they could comply. And by explaining what the law really required, he helped them overcome their initial fears and misperceptions. That's in a small town. Think of what we can do if we start with the big cities of America and block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, show what can be done and how easy it is to comply. The ADA, like all our civil rights laws, is about common sense and simple justice and faith in the human spirit. We at the Justice Department have also worked with businesses and governments to achieve voluntary compliance. For us, it's simple. Educate first, negotiate second, and if I gotta, I'll litigate. We would much rather spend money and see a business spend money on attracting new customers than defending a lawsuit. We would rather see a business pay for access than for attorney's fees. In fact, since the law went into effect, the Justice Department has only had to resort to litigation 20 times, and we have never lost. All of your stories are the stories that must echo through this land in a time when some seek to accentuate the negative. You all have this morning accentuated the positive forces of this great land. You are the ambassadors for access, the ones whose stories must grace the pages of our newspapers, the one who must go forth and shift the law into the next century. You must help demonstrate that businesses should achieve access, not just because it is the law, but because it's the right thing to do. We should not expect the ADA to change America overnight. Decades of indifference cannot be undone in 5 years. For far too long, the doors remained shut, and in many places, they still do. But one day soon, they too will open, because each of you are the key